morning, everybody. Доброго ранку. Слава Україні. I'm Katerina Kovalenko. I'm a Vice President for Strategic Alliances at Nova Ukraine and happy to work with an organization being led by Nick, Erin, and other board members who are still continue working in California and here. And for these 2 days, I will be your conference guide, and I will try to make these 2 days a nice experience for you. We want you to enjoy, to be equipped with new knowledge, instruments, insights, for you to come back to your states, to your local communities, be ready to advocate and to be heard. And some words before we start. This is a 7th Ukraine Action Summit. And you know that every summit is a new level up. And this summit too, this is the first time when we have prepared a conference and expo for you. And before we'll go deeper into the conference, I would like to say a huge thank you to Oris Mahlai, who made an expo a great place for us to share our experiences, to demonstrate our projects, for us to find interesting initiatives for collaboration, to network, and to spend time together with you. Oris, thank you so much for doing this. Over the next 2 days, we'll engage in the meaningful discussions. We will have 8 panel discussions. We will have 4 panel discussions for today and 4 panel discussions for tomorrow. And behind every panel discussions, there are hours and hours of research, of connecting people, of finding interesting and really important information that will help you to be more effective during the next advocacy days. Our big purpose for these 2 days of the conference is to make it, provide a more context for you to understand what happens in Ukraine, what are needs, what are opportunities, and where Ukraine and UAS can partner. So please, we are not able to go deep into every topic, but what we can do, we can raise different aspects of the topic for you to have those angles, and probably you will have a chance and opportunity and interest to go deeper into researching and learning every aspect that will be covered today. So, just to remind that the structure of this summit has 3 big parts. So the first part is a conference today and tomorrow. The second part is advocacy training for those people who will go on the Hill for trainings, for advocacy, and Tuesday and Wednesday advocacy days. So today it's not a training for advocacy, but today it's a preparation for you to give more information and more wider perspective on what we will go and what we will do later. So some instructions. So we have, as I already mentioned, we carefully gathered topics and speakers, and for us it's very important to make this conference really practical. Between every panel discussion, we will have 15 minutes break. It's not like a full coffee time, but we want to use this time for you to reach out to our speakers, for you to reach out to your neighbors and talk more, to exchange cards, to share your thoughts, and to get connected for future collaboration. So please make sure that you have these 15 minutes, because we cannot guarantee that all our speakers will be available to stay us all the day. So we will have those 15 minutes and you can use that time. And we will have 1 hour lunch break, and we will give more instructions later on that. So, I think we are ready. If you have any questions for panel discussion, I'm not sure that we will have enough time to cover all questions from the audience. So on the screen, we will have a QR code. So feel free to use that QR code and ask any question you want to any panel. And we will try to answer in email or even today during the day. So if you have any questions, again, I'm here, or our volunteers can help you. And I think we are ready to move forward, and I'm so delighted to announce our first panel, one of the most important and most significant topic for all of us. It's the topic about security guarantees. Tomorrow, on Monday, we will talk more on policy side of this topic, but today we want to talk more about opportunities and partnerships. And I'm so happy to invite moderator Daniel Runder, who said yes immediately with such short notice about the panel, who was so full of energy, ideas, and connected us with great people. So I'm deeply grateful, Daniel, for you being here with us today, sharing your experience and connecting our panelists. So Daniel Runder, Senior Advisor at DevTech Systems and the Center for Strategic and Investment International Studies, where he directed the Ukraine Economic Reconstruction Commission. He served on the board of the Ukrainian Moldova American Enterprise Fund, which has made over 30 venture investments in Ukraine. UMAFEF also founded Horizon Capital, the country's leading growth equity fund. Daniel, the stage is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'd ask the panelists come on up here, and we'll jump right into it. So the panel's on security guarantees and how Ukraine changes the MilTech industry in the world. I want to first thank my friend Ambassador Aaron McKee, Nova Ukraine, for asking me to do this, and the organizers of this conference. I'm really happy to be here. I think one of the things I want us to take away is that to see Ukraine as an asset, Ukraine as an ally. So when you go and talk on the Hill, many people will be moved by the humanitarian plight because it's significant and it moves people, and I'm sure it moves many people in this room. But I think as you go and talk to policymakers and elected members of Congress, it's very, very important to see Ukraine not as a charity case, not as a recipient of assistance, but as an asset. So I think this conversation, will build on that message. I also want to do a free shout out to my friend Alex Romanishin, who's here in the audience, and he's going to do a panel at 2 o'clock looking at the economic benefits that Ukraine and the Ukrainian diaspora provide in terms of jobs and investment to America. And so I want to do like a special infomercial for my friend Alex's panel later. But again, I think the message of this panel is Ukraine as an ally, Ukraine as an asset. Think about it in those terms. And I know the organizers of this conference are thinking about that as well and see it that way. So with that as sort of a frame, and for you, just as my admonition for you as you go out to the Hill, because several of you are going to go and talk to elected members of Congress, I want to just think of those, keep short, simple messages. Okay, so look, there's a lot to cover. I'm going to ask Gulsana Mamadiv, who's now at Georgetown, but was one of the senior officials at the Ministry of Digital Transformation in this government, and to kind of help us kind of start the conversation, to give us a context of what we're going to be talking about. So, Gulsana, let me start with you.
Thank you very much. This is a real pleasure to speak specifically on this topic, which I so much proud and was lucky to be part of. I would frame it like Ukrainian innovation ecosystem. You probably all heard about, I will just give the foundation, yes, where Ukraine is now and what, how it could be considered as really an asset, and what others can learn or build partnership with that. Ukrainian digital transformation journey started in 2019 when we were 100 number 2 in UN in government index, and today we number 5 on digital.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And this is literally the fastest country in the world, according to UN, in terms of digital transformation of e-government. this is really, I think, reflecting and speaking a lot about Ukrainian policy and human centricity, how Ukraine think about its citizen and how Ukraine think about human rights in serving its constituents. What I want to draw, it's first of all very related to security and defense. It's drone manufacturing in Ukraine and how Ukraine being able to use drones and innovation. You all know that this is the most technological war we have ever seen. And this is because of Ukrainian creativity and innovation. Ukrainians first started to use drones and unmanned system at the battlefield that changed doctrine dramatically. Now, every time in NATO or other foreign military exercises, when Ukrainian group representative happen to be present and show what they learn and what they know, their expertise, all others says, okay, we basically don't know now how to do war anymore. It's shifted so much, it's changed so much, and Ukraine is leading the way. Of course, Russia is adapting. They're really good at scaling, we have to admit it, but this is why we have to show other countries what's going on, because Ukrainians, those who knows, yes, about the military unit, they are busy with number one job, they are fighting the war. And all of us, I think, should speak and communicate about this, how the war is changing and why it's important for other countries come and learn and see, because Russia is learning. If Russia is learning, China is learning, Iran is learning. So this bloc is really coordinating and sharing knowledge and sharing the experience, while what's happening with the free world is little bit, I think, there is no enough speed in sharing this experience and learning. So doctrine shift, and Ukraine really possess now as a future leader an arsenal for the free world. Once we win the war in Ukraine, Ukraine is able and aspiring to protect Europe and build partnerships across the transatlantic. And we have really a solid foundation for that. There was numbers of innovations that happening in defense. Drones is like one aspect, but it's a tiny. The whole battle management and changed. They said like doctrine is shifting dramatically. Ukraine introduced Day1 cluster. This is state-baked defense innovation cluster that unites startups, established firms, military units, end users, and venture capital to drive innovation and to provide opportunity to test, prototype, and deploy the technology on the battlefield, learn very quickly. And now today Ukraine has Amazon, like just think about this, Amazon-like marketplace with more than 1,000 drones listed that available for military units to procure weapons system in less than like as short as 10 days. This is enormous. This is enormous number, right? And how Ukraine in the speed, I think that's the main advantage. Ukraine introduced Delta system, situation awareness and battlefield management system that already is integrated with NATO and other countries. And NATO itself is learning and keen. So, like very shortly, what it is C4, command and control, compute and communication system that gather all information and provides that in a system. So military units are able to coordinate between themselves in a seconds, identify target when it's entered the battlefield. So it's really like very advanced digitalization of the battlefield. There is a number of other products like Army Plus, Reserve Plus. The whole approach is digitalizing with the aim to save human lives and let's say, machine and tech fight happening in Ukraine now. This is one aspect. There's another aspect how Ukraine is managing crisis, right? And approach, like I couldn't mention Dia, when Ukrainians now are able to marry online, to pay taxes in 2 clicks. Just imagine, Ukrainian government didn't stop to operate even for a minute during all this what's happening. So there's a lot to learn from Ukraine as an amazing case study, while not only learning but also transferring, and Ukraine is willing and able to share this. So I think the other countries should think, and we should be advocating to find this win-win and to find this partnership model on the various level, and I think government level, business level, civil society level. Yeah. So
great. Thank you so much. Again, I think the message for you all is, that Ukraine is an asset. There's been a revolution in military affairs that Gulsana has been describing, that there's been these different, Brave One, which has accelerated these changes, that there's been this digital transformation across Ukrainian society. It's impacted the defense space, and so I think this is very important. I think drones is a very good shorthand. You hear people talk about drones because it's something you can all visualize. All this, there's a whole bunch of stuff that that's really important that Gulsana was describing. But I think when you talk to people, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've heard they're really good at drones, and this sort of thing," because they've heard that term, and so I think but there's a whole bunch of things that happen for the drones to happen, So I think but again, Ukraine as an asset, Ukraine as an ally. Okay, so we have Vsevolod. Thanks, Vsevolod, for being here. You're the co-founder of the Brighter Ukraine Foundation, and you're a civic activist supporting Ukraine since 2014. You're doing a lot to support the front line, because I think when we think about security guarantees, some of it's about the revolution in defense technology, but it's also about supporting in various ways, both on a lethal way and in a non-lethal way. And obviously the Brighter Ukraine Foundation focuses on the non-lethal side of supporting the warfighter. So Vsevolod, I'm so glad you're here. Please tell us about what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm here to share my perspective of a person who works with military units since 2014, and including volunteering on the front line in 2014 and 2015. So my main point will be is the best security guarantees is Ukrainian army, because we now have two countries in the world who are far ahead in technologies like drones and another which connected with the war, and it is Ukraine and Russia. And that's why my main message is that Ukrainians and Ukraine should be the main ally and best friend for United States of America. So when we're talking about security guarantees, we see that previous agreements cannot work. We see that political situation changing in the countries, and law cannot work like before. So we see that the best guarantee for Ukraine for now will be investment in their army. And when talking about security, we now should think about security and guarantees in the whole world. So the best security globally will be when Ukraine wins, and when Russia face with all consequences for this aggression. So, and of course, NATO will be very lucky if Ukraine joins this alliance. So, my main message. That we should advocate that United States should invest in Ukrainian miltech, because they will gain a lot of benefits for them. So this is the main point.
I love it. Okay, so the message is, I think one of the messages, so we're going to talk about security guarantees, and this is something that I think you're going to be asked about on the Hill, and we're going to be talking about today in this conversation. The best guarantee for Ukraine is the Ukrainian army. Now, there's other things. There's defense tech. It's the will of the people. And having friends matters. But I agree. I think that's a very important message. And I think one of the things for you all to think about as you message is the best guarantee of Ukrainian security is the Ukrainian army. Now, backed up by American partnership, tech innovation, partnerships with other allies. but that's a very important and a good message. Thank you, Sevalad. Okay, Andrew Peak, thanks for being here. I'm really happy you said yes. Andrew was in President Trump's National Security Council twice. He just left President Trump's Security Council in August. He worked on the Ukraine file for President Trump and has been very active in working on the interagency issues in the beginning of the Trump administration on Ukraine. So I think he's very up to date on the thinking in this American government. It's very, very important that as you advocate that you work with the Trump administration and listen to the Trump administration, partner with the Trump administration, because they're going to be in government for the next 3+ years. And so they're going to be a really important partner to Ukraine. So I'm so glad that Andrew Peak agreed to be here. So Andrew, I'm happy to have you talk about anything you want, but I think within the context of this issue of security guarantees and how Ukraine changes the militech industry in the world, which is the title of the panel, you might talk about how militech is affecting how the American government, Ukraine's militech changes that Gulsana was talking about, is impacting the way the American government and the Trump administration specifically is thinking about these things. That might be one topic, but you can talk about anything within the context of this panel. I'm sure people are going to sit on their edge of their seats and listen really carefully to what you have to say. So, Andrew, the floor is yours.
Well, so that's quite a build-up, Dan.
No pressure.
No pressure. So I think the most important thing as you talk about this issue, I think so. I think the most important thing as you talk about this issue, especially with administration or administration adjacent people, I think so, yeah, is to recognize how fraught this is for the president, for the administration, for people who support the administration. This Ukraine, Russia basket of issues. It is the most politically volatile issue that has existed in the last 10 years that the president has been the mainstay of American politics. His campaign was investigated in 2016 during the campaign for issues related to this. He was then, of course, had a special counsel appointed for the same reason. He was impeached on an adjacent issue. And to make matters even more volatile, many of the terms like democracy and democratization and democracy support were weaponized against his supporters in various ways during the pandemic and during the period kind of following the pandemic to impose certain things that they hated, that my party hated. Things like free speech restrictions, vaccine issues, and so forth. So as you go into this, as you talk to people about this, just recognize that this is an incredibly, incredibly fraught issue. So I would foot stamp Dan's point about doing it thoughtfully. So the interesting thing about this being so fraught is that the signal and the noise, if I can rip like a political science term out of our college classes, about the president's Russia policy, about the president's Ukraine policy, are actually pretty different. Even though he had all this criticism, even though he pursued a policy towards Russia and Ukraine in his first term that was not too terribly different from his predecessor's policy. In fact, in several key ways, it was actually more hawkish than Obama's Ukraine-Russia policy. He, as he will rightfully note, was the first to give Ukraine lethal aid in the U.S. government, including Javelin missiles that were critical, part of the critical pushback against the initial Russian invasion in 22. He sanctioned Nord Stream pipeline. He was highly critical to the amusement of many Europeans about the European reliance on Russian energy, which was just dollars for the Russian war machine. These things are all conventional wisdom now. But at the time, they were often widely ridiculed, as well as other issues like withdrawal from the Open Skies Treaty and a few other beats. And I think it is also interesting, again, just because I'm an academic, just from a political science perspective, that Russia, under Putin, invaded a neighbor under every U.S. president, including Clinton with the Second Chechen War, except for Donald Trump. So obviously there was something, even if we accept that there's a small sample size, that the president was doing right. So what did he do right? Well, the main thing to me is that he aligned Ukraine's, the political messaging about Ukraine with the material support. That is, he actually upped the material support for Ukraine and the deterrence he showed against Russia with decreasing the political messaging about it. We cited the javelins and the Nord Stream sanctions and so forth. In my view, the Biden administration did the opposite. They tended to talk about Ukraine while being slow often on material support. So at the start of this administration, what we intended to do was return to the policy that had helped achieve stability with Russia, with Ukraine on the NATO Eastern Front. That is, consciously decrease the political messaging about Ukraine, about Russia, about the war, while sustaining the material support. And I think it is noteworthy, we are having this conference 3 days after the president dropped the big one, right? Put aside the discussion about tomahawks, the sanctions he imposed on, or announced on Wednesday, I believe, night, against Lukoil and Rosneft is the big one. There is no bigger sanction than that. That is something people have been calling for a long time. So as we move further into this peace process, I think it's incumbent on us to recognize what the policy is, the direction it's going, and rhetorical and policy gaps among others. There's a gentleman here who's wearing a Make Russia Pay $300 billion sovereign assets shirt. That is absolutely right? That is absolutely something the Europeans could do tomorrow. And so if I were the president, I suspect, and I had European senior leaders telling me that I must do X, Y, or Z while they are sitting on whatever is in Euroclear, 140 billion, in that one company, and not taking action because some other reason, because the reserve current, they want to keep the reserve currency, the Eurozone stable or something else, while still hectoring the president, I'd be pretty annoyed, rightfully, and I think he is. So I'm happy to talk more at length about where we are in the peace process. I'm happy to talk about the security guarantee specifically. I think this will come out a little bit in the questions, but
okay.
I want to turn it over to my friend ambassador.
Let me just foot stomp a couple of things that Andrew said, because I'm thinking about your audience and what your job is over the next several days. The first message I want to give you is there are going to be people you're going to talk to that have a different perspective than you, that you're going to be walking into. These folks have a lot of influence on what happens to Ukraine, right? So in some instances, you're not going to change their views about some pretty hardly thought through things. You're not going to change their views about certain things. So it's very important you understand that, okay? I also think what I'm hearing you say, Andrew, is I think it's important to say a couple of things. When you're talking to, say, the Trump administration, you need to understand they're coming from perhaps some folks in this room may share their views, some people may not, but they got a perspective, and it's in a very, very important perspective, and they're going to be an audience you have to engage, and you have to understand where they're coming from. So the first message you want to say is thank you. Thank you for the javelins. Thank you for calling out Nord Stream. Thank you. We're very appreciative to the Trump administration for doing these things. And it's very important you say it. Start with thank you, okay? Okay? Keep it simple. The other thing is, I think that's been very important, is to framing around, this is I've been saying about Ukraine as an asset, Ukraine as an opportunity, Ukraine as an ally. So I do think that we want to think about how we think, as we talk to them, they've talked about, there's also around burden sharing. This is something that Andrew was talking about. So one of the burdens is making sure that the Europeans stop buying Russian gas. There are still European countries today, guess what? Buying Russian gas. There are countries in Europe that are buying more gas today from Russia than providing aid to Ukraine. And this is a very well-informed audience, and I bet there are people who don't know that in this room. That it's shocking and appalling, but it's true. So I think this issue around burden sharing is very important, whether it's around frozen assets, whether it's around accelerating and making sure that Ukraine joins the European Union. This is also a part of the security guarantees. There's an enormous amount of money will flow to Ukraine when they join fully the European Union. So in my mind, we want to pressure, we should use the Americans to pressure on things like getting the Europeans to stop on gas from Russia, but also to get them to accelerate on confiscating these frozen assets that very well, like the messaging, and you need to go and check out this shirt and get a picture with them. And then I think the other thing is we want to accelerate the joining the European Union, because that's where the real money is. Poland got 300 billion euros over 20 years when it joined the European Union. Hungary, I think, got 20 billion. So when Hungary complains, they got 20 billion euros. So when I was in Budapest, I was like, come on, guys, you're giving Ukraine a hard time. You got 20 billion euros. Give me a break, right? Okay. So, all right. So now I'm really happy to introduce my friend, Ambassador Bill Taylor. He was Ambassador to Ukraine. He was also our acting ambassador. He's at the Atlantic Council. He's a very important voice for Ukraine here in Washington. He's someone I really admire, and so he's also spent a lot of time. He was in the U.S. Army, had an Army career, and then he had a second career at the State Department as a Foreign Service officer, and has been a reliable friend to Ukraine for many years. So, Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Dan, it's a great pleasure to be here. It's a great pleasure to be on this panel. This is a great panel that you put together, Dan, and I've already learned some great things about what we're here to talk about here today. I'm going to come back, as Andrew suggested, to security guarantees. But before I do, I want to add one other headline, one other bumper sticker. I mean, Ukraine is an asset. I mean, we've said that over and over, and we will continue to say that. It's a very important message to hammer home. Ukraine is an asset. NATO would be better off if Ukraine were part of it. It will make it stronger. Ukraine's got the strongest army and the most experienced army on the continent. So that is going to be an important thing. We've talked, and we'll come back. The second message, though, is Russia is not winning this war. Ukraine is not losing this war. Ukraine can win this war. And I do believe that I looked to Andrew on this thing. I think President Trump has recognized that. And that has motivated, that I think even explains a lot of his recent support for Ukraine. He has realized that Russia is not winning this. He may have thought earlier, Andrew, you can talk about this, he may have thought earlier that there was no chance. That he doesn't, that Zelensky doesn't have the cards. Well, as he knows now, Zelensky does have the cards, many cards. So that I think it's important for Congress to recognize this. I think President Trump has recognized this. Russia is not winning, and Ukraine is not losing, and it can win. All right. Quickly on security guarantees. Security guarantees, we've talked a little bit about this. The best one, of course, would be joining NATO, would be a full member of NATO. That would mean that it's the cheapest version. It's the most effective version. If Ukraine were a member of that, that would mean that Article 5, the commitment to that attack on Ukraine would be an attack on all and have to take the appropriate response. So that would be. However, Ukraine is now thinking more broadly about security guarantees, because this administration, let's be clear, the administration does not yet support Ukraine joining NATO. I think it may come to that. It may get there. I hope so. Andrew can help on this thing. You can help get them to this thing. But Ukraine and the president's office in Ukraine has thought a lot about this issue on security guarantees, and they've got 4 components. It's broader than just the military side. It starts, however, with the military side. It's exactly right. The first component of security guarantee is the Ukrainian army. in the Ukrainian armed forces. And in order to make it as strong as possible, that army needs to continue to get the weapons and the support. I would say the tomahawks, we put it aside, but nonetheless, the tomahawks are still on the table, as near as I can tell, haven't been taken off the table. That would be an important component to make the Ukrainian army very strong. Ursula von der Leyen talks about the steel porcupine. The first element is going to be the first element of deterrence to keep the Russians from coming back, which they will do if they're not deterred, is going to be the Ukrainian army. The second is going to be a backup from the European Union as a coalition of the willing. So it's not going to be NATO, at least not immediately, and we do need immediately a security guarantee. And to be fair to the Europeans, the British and the French are leading something they call the Coalition of the Willing, which met yesterday virtually. The British Prime Minister led this. They're putting together a force to go into Ukraine, a military force to go into Ukraine on the ground with real forces after the fighting stops. And the Brits and the French have said, we'll put soldiers. The Lithuanians and the Estonians, we'll put soldiers. Others have talked about what they will provide, some financial support, some weapon support. President Trump has said we'll provide air support. So this is a serious component of a security guarantee. First is the Ukrainian army. Second is this coalition of the willing. The third we've already talked about as well. And this is not, you don't think of this one when you talk about security guarantees right off the bat, but they see membership in the European Union as a third component of their guarantee of security. It's economic, it's political. They think, and I think they're right, that Putin will think twice, 3 times before he attacks a member of the European Union. I think that's going to be an important component. The fourth is the economic side, and that includes sanctions that we just talked about. And Andrew's entirely right about the big deal that this administration, the Treasury, put out a couple of days ago that says the top 2 oil companies, Russian oil companies, that haven't been sanctioned. How could that be? Why weren't they sanctioned earlier? Well, they're now sanctioned, and they represent probably 50% of the Russian oil. And if that 50% can go down, which these sanctions will make it happen, then the revenues that come into the Russian treasury from the sale of oil and gas go down. And it makes it that much harder for Putin to be able to fund this war. There are other parts of the economics as well. We've talked about the $300 billion. Super important. And again, I credit the Europeans for coming up with an idea that broke the logjam. I mean, that $300 billion has been sitting out there for 3.5 years. And for 3.5 years, that $300 billion has been frozen. It's been frozen and earning interest, and that interest has gone to support Ukraine. That's a good thing. But there was this hesitation. There may be some international lawyers in the room, but the international lawyers were very concerned about the legal aspects of seizing this $300 billion. So they've come up, the Europeans, and the European Commission, again, give them credit, came up with this idea that we're not going to seize these. We're not going to take these $300 billion. We're going to lend them to the Ukrainians. We're going to lend this $300 billion. And if the Russians ever pay reparations, it'll be more than $300 billion for sure. If the Russians ever pay reparations, then the Ukrainians will have to pay it back. If the Russians don't pay it back, if the Russians don't provide these reparations, the Ukrainians don't have to pay this back. So this is a good move that's to be supported, and that's moving forward. They didn't make it to the political decision this past week, but they are on track to make that work. They just have to convince the Belgians that the Belgians won't be left hanging out there if that's a problem.
But Ambassador, it's important to understand that the Belgians, why the Belgians? That's a teeny country. You explain why, Ambassador.
Well, somebody's already mentioned that Euroclear. There's a little organization in Belgium that's headquartered in Belgium called Euroclear, where many, probably 190 billion of the 300 billion that we're talking about here, the Russians parked it there. That was a mistake. The Russians made a big mistake. Putin, when he invaded, didn't realize he had half of his foreign currency reserves in Western banks. But the point is, the Belgians are the holdup right now. We may have to worry later about the Hungarians and the Slovaks, but we'll get there. We will get there. I'm absolutely convinced we'll get there. And that will mean, the reason that's so important is that will guarantee the Ukrainians are fiscally, financially stable, able to pursue this war for the next 2 years, easily for the next 2 years, without U.S. taxpayers, without European taxpayers. Who's paying? The Russians, and that's exactly who should pay. So those 4 components of the security guarantee, I think we should emphasize. First is the Ukrainian army. Second is this coalition of the willing. Third is membership in the EU, and the fourth are the economic ones that we just talked about. Dan, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ambassador. So how should these folks, when they go and talk to congressional offices, talk about security guarantees, Ambassador? Let me just, how should they talk about this? And I see there's somebody from a congressional office here. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit later because I want you to talk. I want you to say, when these folks come and lobby your office or your boss or your neighbors, how should they be talking about this conversation? So I'm going to come back to you at the end for that. But Ambassador, how should they talk about this? How should they talk about this?
So again, the security guarantees are important so that Russia doesn't invade again. Because let's say there is, so what needs to happen and going forward here is President Trump needs to continue to be strong on support of Ukraine and strong on putting pressure on Putin. 3 days ago, he took big step on putting the real pressure on Putin. Putin recognized that. Putin said, we don't negotiate under pressure. Recognizing that he is under pressure, that's important. He will have to. So that's important. But the second component of that of this pressure is also important, and that is weapons. Tomahawks, others, continued flow of weapons. And that, we go back to these funds. I mean, you need that $300 billion in order to buy the weapons from the American manufacturers. That's going to be important. So when that pressure works, and Putin realizes that he can't wait out the Ukrainians, he can't wait out the Europeans, he can't wait out us, then he will come to the table. He will figure out a way to stop the fighting. He'll have to do that. But unless there is a security guarantee in that context, at that point, he'll build back up. His economy is in bad shape right now. His army is in bad shape right now. But he'll take advantage of that pause to build up. And if there's not a security guarantee for the Ukrainians, he'll fight. He'll come again. He'll invade again. That will undoubtedly, because he is. I'll stop with this. He has made it very clear. Everybody in this room knows, but be sure you keep this in your talking points. Putin has been explicit. He's been very clear about what his goal is, and that's to eliminate Ukraine as a country. That's what he wants. And if he has a temporary stop, a temporary pause, if he's halted by the strength of the Ukraine and the strength of the Ukrainian army and all the support that he's gotten in the other, that the Ukrainians have in these other components, if he's stopped by that, he'll come back. So they need the security guarantee of strong support for the Ukrainian army, for this our support for Coalition of the Willing, for membership in the EU, and I would say in NATO, and then the economic hammer being continued to put on Putin.
Okay, Andrew, let me just put you on the spot. Let me just press on one thing or two things. One is this issue of the sanctions on oil. What does that mean? So does that mean if I'm India and I buy oil from Lukoil, does that mean I get sanctioned? Like if I'm a bank in India and I provide a loan, is that what it means? Or if I'm an Indian tanker or I'm a Chinese tanker, do I get dinged by this? Because I think that's what you're implying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to have a tremendous effect on forcing Chinese and Indian entities to draw back. They're going to have to, if they want to move their oil, they being Russia, they're going to have to offer a tremendously steep discount on price.
So if it's going for $100 on the regular market, the Russians will have to sell it for $80 or $70
More, I would suspect.
So it's $100. They have to sell for 50 because of the headache that India or China is going to take on by buying this oil. There's a headache cost to buying Russian oil, right? Because of the sanction.
Absolutely, and this is something that, in spirit, also evokes the president's sanctions on Iran in the first term, which were historically effective in lowering Iran's oil exports down to something like 100,000 barrels a day at the peak of the max pressure.
And help bankrupt and make more poor Iran, right, in the process.
Absolutely, and that was critical because they were using their reserve currency to bolster their domestic currency, and so they were reaching a point where there was going to be catastrophic internal.
So we want to bankrupt Russia, right? That's right. We agree on that. We want to bankrupt Russia. So this is a good thing, guys. Okay, we don't want them to have money in the piggy bank, and the way they get money in the piggy bank is by selling their oil, and then there are people or gas, and so there are European countries today, as I said, that are buying more gas today than providing aid to Ukraine, and then the biggest buyers of Russian oil are China and India, and so now they're going to think really hard about it, or they'll say, "I'll buy instead of $100, I'll take it for 50." So that means there's less money in the piggy bank for Putin to finance their war, right? Right.
Absolutely.
Dan, if I could make one point on that, the sanctions on India and China. When you talk to people in the Senate, recall that there is a bill in the Senate, sponsored by Senator Graham, Senator Blumenthal, that has 85 co-sponsors. There are 85 co-sponsors.
100. 85 out of 100.
85 out of 100
It's unheard of.
It's unheard of. It's obviously bipartisan. And this bill would put as much as 500% tariffs on any nation that continues to buy oil and gas from Russia. The point is, there is strong political support. President Trump has political cover to take these actions because, by the way, he doesn't need that authority. He's got the authority. He's used the authority. But he's got the cover.
It helps.
He's got the political cover. And when you ask American people if they support Ukraine or support Russia, it's overwhelming support for Ukraine. So that's there to build on.
All right, let me just be sorry to be so repetitive, but you guys, it's really important to repeat messages when you go to the Hill, and it's got to be really simple, okay? Really simple. First message is thank you. And there'll be some offices you go to that didn't vote for for money, right, for Ukraine. But you need to just say, thanks for receiving me. Thanks for taking this meeting. They don't have to take this meeting, okay? They don't have to take your meeting. So you have to say, thank you for taking the meeting, even if they didn't vote for it. Thank you for hearing me out. You need to say, Ukraine is an asset. Ukraine is an ally. Ukraine is an opportunity. Ukraine can win. Yes. Ukraine can win. Okay, so I want to just press Ambassador and Andrew, and then I'm going to come back to our friends Vsevolod and as well as Sana on this. But I want to just press them. Could you just please, just so our friends in the audience understand, who are the people backing Russia? Who are the countries that are helping Russia? Because a lot of people who may have voted again didn't help Ukraine. There's certain countries they don't like. Okay, and when they figure out, I want to remind you, who are Russia's friends? So can I just ask you each, so Andrew, who's helping Russia?
Sure. So China, Iran, North Korea's introduction of combat forces into the Ukraine conflict has been a new development. These are America's enemies.
So America's enemies are helping Russia. The Star Wars bar of countries is helping Russia, right? Okay, all right. So Sana and Vsevolod, I want you to just comment on anything you've heard so far, please.
Yes. Not just helping, yes, they're learning. Chinese are learning and help Russia to scale production of military tech. And this is very important, and I want to build on this, that while you will probably hear argument that, okay, this is, yes, Ukraine is doing well and drones, but this is different type of war. It's a land war. What U.S. is preparing is war in the ocean. So this lessons are great, but not really applicable to us. The counter argument for that is there is a reason why China is so much involved in helping Russia. They are learning heavily in production, in military techniques, in operations, in digitalization of all the processes and administration does. So the question why US is not doing this, knowing that the main adversary are there and very much involved in this. Like China actually, the country that is, the most favoring from this war, because they are selling components and manufacturing to, they really doing economically and get economic benefit from this. So coming back to my point that I want to emphasize, that we need to speak very clearly that China is very much there. China is very much learning, not only from geopolitical and political perspective, like how to handle and build a strategy around Taiwan, because that's really connected, but also from like very technically and operationally, they are learning what's going on in Ukraine on the battlefield. And another point I want to kind of bring here is also very practical, at least it works very much with European authorities actually asking, like, imagine when if Russia is attacking today, whom you prefer to be with as your peer. Of course, it will be Ukrainian soldier who knows the techniques with their attack, with their operations, with their experience. There is no any other question and no any chance for Europe and European countries to win and get this experience, like to learn so quickly as to be paired with Ukraine. And this is a very valid argument why Ukraine should be at NATO, because
Who do you want fighting by your side? That's
Exactly.
the question
Yeah,
for
that's
the
the
Europeans.
question.
If Russia comes knocking on your door, Estonia, who do you want in the trench with you? And you want Ukraine in the trench with you, right? That's what the message is,
Absolutely, that's
right?
what I mean. And the third point, and I promise finish here. So, and the third point, what we see, there's the military exercises, and there's a very significant trend that's going on, that governments tend, at least like in Europe and Eastern Europe specifically, but I think it should be like spread more, that each and every weapon should be tested in Ukraine. There's a expensive weapon system that built and lying in a pile in the stocks and never used, and then when it's deployed, it's apparently is not very valuable and not bringing so much benefit to the armed forces. And nobody now is actually looking at the weapon that has not been tested in Ukraine. Show that it's work in Ukraine, show that it's have been proved there in the battle, and then it makes sense to buy it. There is no reason to do anything, any procurement that was attacked that was not tested in Ukraine. This is so relevant to NATO that should be like very much, I think, projected.
So weapons that cost $100,000 or $1 million cost $10,000 in Ukraine to make, right? And I think, so you have these really expensive pieces of equipment that have never been fully battle tested. And so one of the things as you talk to members of Congress is say the bad guys are learning, but also Ukraine's innovating, and we want to learn from that. But also, if you have American and Western weapon systems have the opportunity to be, for the first time ever, battle tested, and we're going to learn from that because we're going to need to know that in case there's a problem with China or something we don't know about, right? Those are the messages. Okay, Vsevolod, please.
Yes, I want to exactly continue messages which Sana said, that China learning from Russia, but we have from another side, Ukraine. So US and other allies can learn from Ukraine. And actually, what I want to say, Russians learn from Ukrainian too. And then China learning from Russians. But so we can learn from Ukraine from the first hand. So, for example, first FPV drone was used by Ukrainian in 2022. And then when it was effective. Russians started replicating this. And then Ukrainians started adapting another drones for a battlefield. And Russian replicating this. So Ukraine is the best ally for United States to learn with, to cooperate with. And as Sana saying, and Daniel, that in Ukraine we have limited resources, we have limited time. So under this pressure of aggression of Russia, our Ukrainian great people innovating a lot of new technologies, which immediately proven and tested on battlefield. So, like cooperating with Ukraine, you receive R&D, research and development based in Ukraine, and immediately testing on the battlefield. So I see here direct cooperation.
I will probably comment on the second one. I think it's important to mention the narrative that there is a sick imperialistic society in Russia, and they will not stop. They didn't stop when they were giving Crimea. Honestly, they didn't stop when they took control of the Donbass.
And they're oppressing churches, and they're repressing religion.
And especially for example, like I'm Crimean Tatar. There's indigenous people in Crimea, and what's happening with in occupied Crimea just invisible for the world, but the human suffering is no much less than on the front line with all political repression, searches, and so on. So this, I think, important also to mention and project that there is a sick imperialistic society very alive, very present in Russia today.
Okay.
Maybe I'll make a short note about this frozen assets questions. We still have some amount of that frozen assets in the United States. It's around like 5 billions. And Europe watching a lot what the United States doing. So if we will show them sample that we like have we will seize these assets and give to Ukraine, that maybe this can help. So, but also I wanted to add to this mention, I don't know, maybe we have this in Europe. Maybe you should like share experience like European coalition for Ukraine when everyone go into Euro Parliament and advocate for Ukraine also.
Andrew?
So I think this is an excellent question on the repo piece. I personally would not, I don't know how helpful it would be to unilaterally take the RSAs in this country in as much as it's 1/20th of the overall total. And it is possible, and so we would take the
We're not going to jump on our own. It's too small potatoes.
Right, exactly. I agree I agree that there is there's political pressure you can put on the Europeans. I think promising to seize ours if they seize theirs, I think would probably be a preferred way to go forward. But I think it's a good point.
Sorry, I think my sense about this is that the vote was to send a signal, like, we're prepared to do this. If you all are willing, let's all jump together. So the problem is Belgium, because they got all this money. It's like the size of their entire economy is sitting in some banks in Belgium. And then they also they make money off of this. So if they seize the assets, then they're going to lose like their livelihoods. That's their argument. I'm not going to say I agree with it, but that's what they think. And then in Washington, if I think, Ambassador, when we've talked about doing this here in Washington, the State Department's like, hell yeah, let's do it. And then there are people at the Treasury Department who are like, ooh, I don't know, it creates a bad precedent, right? And so there's been some issues in terms of, but I think continuing to have votes on this is important because it signals like we're prepared to do this as we move up the sanctions ladder, like just doing this is another level up the ladder. It's sooner or later, this could happen, right? This could happen, right, Ambassador?
It surely could happen. As Mark points out, the president has the authority to do this. The Europeans, this is the European Union that is now taking this step. And that's why we're talking about 150 to 190 billion. There's other money As you've pointed out, there's about 10 billion in the United States, plus or minus. I'm not sure what the number is. There's some money in the UK. There's some money in Canada. There's some money in Japan. And exactly what Andrew said, we need to do this together. But we also need to press the Europeans to do this. I mean, that's where the big bulk of this money is, and it's really important. The money's not going to come from anywhere else. The money is not going to come from American taxpayers. I mean, this administration is not going to ask for another supplemental to fund this. I bet. I'd love to be wrong. So it's not going to come from the United States. It's not. The Europeans are having their own fiscal problems. Political problems too, but fiscal problems, not going to come from there. So this is where they're going to get the money. And it's
frozen assets, or it's going to be
and
EU
so
accession.
we need to push the Europeans, ourselves, the Brits, the Japanese, the Canadians to move forward on this. And all together, as Andrew says, is the way to go.
Sorry. Okay. So the message is: thank you. Ukraine is an asset. Ukraine is an ally. Ukraine can win. Ukraine has never asked to put American troops on the ground and never will. But Ukraine can win. And what Gulsana and others were saying is like the innovations that are happening on the battlefield are something that America and the West are going to benefit from and should benefit from. Right? Those are the short messages. And then you'll get your homework assignments in terms of saying, please vote for this bill, or thank you for voting for this bill. But then stay in touch. Don't be a stranger. Jim's your friend. And Jim's an outlier, and Jim's an old hand. And so listen to Jim, get Jim's card, and listen to what he has to say. He's right. So I want to thank the panelists for doing this. Please join me in thanking the panelists.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Daniel, Gulsana, Vsevolod, Andrew, Bill. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for opening so many different insights of the topic. That was amazing. I think we are ready for the next day, for advocacy, for meetings. And Daniel, thank you so much for highlighting these important insights and for practical advice. Thank you.